I never thought I'd become afraid of my own daughter. But standing there in my kitchen at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, watching 19-year-old Madison scroll through her phone while barking orders at me like I was hired help, I realized I didn't recognize the person she'd become. Mom, I told you I wanted almond milk. This is oat milk. Can you seriously not read labels anymore? She didn't look up. Her perfectly manicured nails I'd paid for last week, tapped against her phone screen while I stood at the counter, coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips. Madison, and the temperature in here is ridiculous. Do you touch the thermostat again? I've told you 100 times I need it at exactly 68 degrees or I can't sleep. It was 7 a.m. She'd just woken up in my house. The house I'd worked double shifts for 15 years to pay off after her father left us. The house where I'd raised her alone, sacrificed vacations and new clothes and my own dreams so she could have dance lessons and summer camps and a car when she turned 16. The heating bill was $400 last month, I said quietly. Madison finally looked up, and the expression on her face made my stomach clench. It was contempt. Pure, undisguised contempt. Then get a better job. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that had been burning for months, maybe years. I'd been ignoring the flames, telling myself it was just a phase, that she was stressed from college, that the pandemic had been hard on everyone. But this wasn't stress. This was cruelty. I have 3 jobs, Madison. She shrugged, returning her attention to her phone. Whatever. Can you move? I need to get something from the freezer. I didn't move. I couldn't. Something in me, something that had been dormant for too long, buried under years of guilt and overcompensation and desperate attempts to be both mother and father, finally cracked. No. Madison's head snapped up. Excuse me? I said no. For a moment, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Surprise? Fear? It vanished so quickly I couldn't be sure. Then her face hardened into that familiar mask of entitled anger. Mom, I'm not kidding. Move. Neither am I. We stared at each other across the kitchen island, and I felt like I was seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time in years. When had she become this person? When had my sweet little girl who used to leave love notes under my pillow transformed into this cold stranger who spoke to me like I was beneath her? I need to get into the freezer, Madison said again, and now there was something else in her voice, something I couldn't quite place. Urgency? Nervousness? Why? What do you mean, why? I want ice cream. At 7 a.m? I can eat whatever I want whenever I want. This is my house, too. No, I said, and the word felt foreign on my tongue after years of avoiding it. No, Madison, this is my house. I pay the mortgage. I pay the utilities. I pay for the food you eat and the clothes you wear and the gas in your car. You are a guest here, and lately you've been a very poor one. Madison's face went red. Are you seriously doing this right now? I have class in 2 hours. Then you'd better start walking because I'm not driving you. I have my own car, a car I pay for, insurance I pay for, gas I pay for. She slammed her phone down on the counter so hard I heard the screen crack. What is wrong with you? Why are you being like this? I'm being a mother, something I should have done a long time ago. Madison laughed, but it was ugly. Nothing like the giggle I remembered from her childhood. A mother? You think you've been a mother? You've been a doormat, Mom. You've let me walk all over you for years because you feel guilty. Guilty about what? She opened her mouth, then closed it. That strange expression crossed her face again, the one that looked almost like fear. Nothing. Forget it. Just move, please. I need to get something. And that's when I noticed it. The slight tremor in her hands, the way her eyes kept darting toward the freezer like something was going to jump out of it. the sheen of sweat on her forehead, despite her complaints about the temperature. My daughter wasn't just angry, she was scared. "Madison," I said slowly, "what's in the freezer?" "Nothing. Ice cream, I told you." "Then why do you look terrified?" I'm not." She ran her hands through her hair, and I could see them shaking now, unable to hide it. "Mom, please, just let me get it, and we can forget this whole thing, okay? I'll apologize. I'll be nicer. I'll help around the house, whatever you want." Something cold settled in my chest, not cold like anger, cold like dread. "What did you put in my freezer, Madison?" "Nothing." But she was crying now, tears streaming down her face, mascara she hadn't washed off from the night before, leaving black tracks on her cheeks. My daughter, who hadn't cried in front of me since she was 12, was sobbing like a child. I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have anywhere else to put it. I was going to move it, I swear. I just needed time." "Time for what?" "Time to figure out how to fix it." I moved toward the freezer, and Madison lunged, grabbing my arm with a strength I didn't know she possessed. "Don't. Please, Mom, don't open it. You'll hate me. You'll turn me in. You'll never look at me the same way again." "Madison, you're scaring me." "I'm scaring you?" She laughed through her tears, hysterical now. "I've been scared for 2 weeks. I haven't slept. I can barely eat. Every time someone knocks on the door, I think it's the police." The police. My blood turned to ice. "What did you do, Madison?" She shook her head, backing away from me until she hit the counter. Her whole body was shaking now, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. It wasn't meant to happen. It was an accident. A stupid, horrible accident." I walked to the freezer. "Mom, don't." I opened it. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The freezer was packed with frozen pizzas, ice cream cartons, bags of vegetables, all the normal things you'd expect. But behind them, shoved into the back corner, was a large black garbage bag sealed with duct tape. And it was stained with something dark, something that had seeped through in spots despite the cold. "Madison?" My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded like someone underwater, drowning. "What is in this bag?" She was on the floor now, collapsed against the cabinets, knees pulled up to her chest, like she was 5 years old again, hiding from thunderstorms. It's not a person. God, Mom, it's not. I know what you're thinking, and it's not that." Relief flooded through me, but only for a second, because if it wasn't a person, then what? "It's money." I blinked. "Money?" "And other things. Documents. A hard drive." I reached into the freezer, my hands moving without my permission, and pulled out the bag. It was heavier than I expected, heavy and cold and somehow wrong in a way I couldn't explain. "Where did you get this?" Madison didn't answer. "Madison." From Derek, her boyfriend, the charming 25-year-old entrepreneur who'd swept into her life 6 months ago. The one who drove a BMW and wore designer clothes and never seemed to have a real job, but always had money. The one I'd never trusted, not from the first moment I saw the way he looked at my daughter. Not like she was someone to love, but like she was something to own. What did he do? "He works for people," Madison said. "Bad people." I didn't know at first. I swear I didn't know. But then I started seeing things, hearing things. He'd take calls in the middle of the night and come back with cash, lots of cash. What kind of work? Moving money, laundering it, I think, through cryptocurrencies and offshore accounts. He's like a middleman for... She stopped, swallowed hard. For people you don't say no to. I set the bag on the kitchen table and sank into a chair. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. 2 weeks ago, Madison continued, her voice barely a whisper. Derek told me he was done. He wanted out. He'd been skimming. Just a little at first, but then more. He had enough to disappear. He wanted me to come with him. And I said yes. She looked at me then, and I saw the little girl I remembered, the one who used to believe I could fix anything. I know I should have told you. I know I should have said no. But Mom, I was so deep in it by then. He'd made me do things, help him with the accounts, deliver packages, and I knew if I tried to leave, if I went to the police, I'd go to prison too. I felt sick, physically, violently sick. What happened to Derek? Madison's face crumpled. They found him, the people he was working for, 3 days after he was supposed to run. He called me that night. He was begging Mom, begging them to stop. And then the line went dead. Madison, he's gone. He's dead. I know he's dead, and they're looking for the money. They've called me, shown up at my classes, left notes on my car. They know I know where it is. I looked at the bag on my table, the bag filled with stolen money, money that belonged to people who killed without hesitation. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed, because I knew you'd be disappointed, because I spent months treating you like garbage, pushing me away, being horrible. She was crying so hard now she could barely breathe. I was trying to protect you. If you didn't know anything, they couldn't hurt you. If I was mean enough, if I kept you at a distance, you'd be safe. Everything clicked into place. The sudden shift in her behavior 6 months ago, the coldness, the cruelty, the way she built walls between us brick by brick. She hadn't been pushing me away because she hated me. She had been pushing me away because she loved me. Oh, honey. I went to her, dropped to my knees beside her on the cold kitchen floor and wrapped my arms around her. She resisted at first, her body stiff with guilt and fear, but then she collapsed into me, sobbing against my shoulder like she used to when she was small and the world was still a place I could protect her from. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry. I ruined everything. I ruined my life, and now I'm going to ruin yours. And stop. I pulled back, held her face in my hands. We're going to fix this. How, Mom? These people don't forgive. They don't forget. They will find me. They will kill me. And if they know you know, they'll kill you too. A knock at the front door. We both froze. Mrs. Patterson? A voice I didn't recognize. Deep, male, calm in a way that made it terrifying. We know you're home. We watched you through the window just now. We'd like to have a conversation. Madison grabbed my arm. The back door. Another knock. Harder this time. There's someone at the back door too, sweetheart. Please don't make this difficult. I looked at my daughter. My beautiful, foolish, desperate daughter who'd made terrible choices for understandable reasons, who tried so hard to protect me that she nearly destroyed herself. Stay behind me, I said. Mom, no! Stay behind me. I stood up, straightened my shoulders, and walked to the front door. The man on my porch didn't look like a killer. He was middle-aged, well-dressed, with kind eyes and gray at his temples. He could have been a real estate agent or an insurance salesman or someone's favorite uncle. Mrs. Patterson, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, may we come in? There was no we visible on the porch, but I knew better. I knew they were out there, hidden in cars or behind hedges, watching. Do I have a choice? We always have choices. Some are just wiser than others. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Behind me, I heard the back door open, then footsteps. 2 more men, I guessed, though I didn't turn to look. I kept my eyes on the one in front of me. I'm looking for something. he said, surveying my modest living room with an expression of vague distaste. Something that doesn't belong to your daughter. Something she's been holding on to for 2 weeks that has caused me considerable inconvenience. I don't know what you're talking about. Mrs. Patterson, he sighed. I've done my research. You're a hard-working woman. 3 jobs, wasn't it? You sacrificed everything for your daughter. Your marriage, your youth, your dreams. He turned to look at me. Don't sacrifice your life, too. Mom, no. Madison's voice, small and broken. Quiet, the man said pleasantly. The adults are talking. He walked to the kitchen, and my heart stopped as I realized the freezer was still open, the black bag was still sitting on the table. Ah, there it is. He opened the bag, rifled through its contents, counted something I couldn't see. His expression never changed. It's all there, Madison said from behind me. Every penny. I never touched it. I know. Then take it. Take it and leave us alone. If it were only that simple. He closed the bag, tucked it under his arm. You see, the money was never the real issue. It's the hard drive. What? Derek was smart. Too smart, as it turned out. He kept records, names, dates, transactions, everything, including mine. We didn't look at it. We don't know anything. But you might. And the people I work for don't deal in might. He nodded to the men behind me. Take the daughter. No. I moved before I could think, throwing myself between Madison and the approaching men. Something hard hit my face, a fist, an elbow, and I tasted blood. But I didn't fall. I planted my feet, and I didn't fall. Mom, stop! Madison was screaming. They'll kill you! They're going to kill you! I screamed back. And it was true. I could see it in the man's eyes. Once they had the hard drive, once they had the evidence, there would be no reason to leave witnesses. The gray-haired man watched our struggle with something like amusement. Motherly love. Powerful thing. Inconvenient at times. One of the other men grabbed Madison's arm and she screamed, a high, desperate sound that cut through me like a knife. I lunged, but someone caught me, held me back. I was screaming too now, words that didn't make sense, sounds that were more animal than human. And then a new voice, calm and authoritative. FBI, nobody move. The front door exploded inward. Men in tactical gear flooded the room. The gray-haired man tried to run, but he was tackled before he got 3 steps. The men holding Madison and me were forced to the ground, zip ties appearing on their wrists. And in the center of it all, standing like a statue while chaos swirled around him, was a man I recognized. Madison's academic advisor. He had been at the house a few times, supposedly checking on her progress, making sure she was adjusting to college life. I'd thought he was just a dedicated teacher. Mrs. Patterson, he said, walking toward us. Madison, are you both all right? I couldn't form words. What? My name is Special Agent Thomas Moore. I've been undercover for 18 months, building a case against these men and their organization. When Derek started skimming and the situation became dangerous, I tried to get Madison to safety, but he glanced at my daughter, something almost paternal in his expression. She's stubborn, like her mother. You knew? I looked at Madison. You knew he was FBI? She shook her head. No, I didn't know until 3 days ago. He came to me after Derek died, told me who he really was, said they were close to taking down the whole organization, but they needed the hard drive to do it. The hard drive you put in my freezer. I panicked. I didn't know who to trust. And then when Agent Moore told me the plan, when he said they'd use me as bait to draw out the leaders, they used you as bait?
Agent Moore held up his hands. It was her idea. She refused to let us move her to protective custody. She said if they thought she still had the evidence, they'd come for her and we could catch them. You could have died, I said to Madison. They were going to kill you. They were going to kill us anyway, she said quietly. At least this way we had a chance. And her voice broke. And I couldn't keep lying to you. I couldn't keep pretending to hate you when all I wanted was to tell you the truth and have you fix it like you always fixed everything when I was little. I pulled her into my arms again, held her so tight I could feel her heart beating against mine. You could have told me, I whispered. You should have told me. I know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. The next 2 hours were a blur of police stations and statements and agents in suits asking us the same questions over and over. They took the black bag, inventoried its contents, and informed us that the hard drive contained enough evidence to bring down one of the largest money laundering operations in the state. Derek had been dead for 2 weeks. They'd found his body the day before but hadn't released the information publicly. He'd been brave in the end, refusing to give up Madison's location even when they heard him. Whatever else he'd been, a criminal, a coward, a man who had put my daughter in danger, he'd loved her enough to die for her. It was nearly midnight when we finally got home. The kitchen was still a mess, chairs overturned, blood on the floor where I'd been hit, but it was our home, our mess, our life to rebuild.
I made tea because I didn't know what else to do. Madison sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket despite the warmth, looking younger than she had in years. I owe you an apology, she said. You don't. I do. Not for the last 2 weeks. For the last 2 years. She looked down at her hands, scarred now from where she'd bitten her nails down to nothing. I was so angry, Mom. At Dad for leaving, at you for not being able to stop him, at myself for not being enough to make him stay. Madison, I know it wasn't your fault. I've always known. But it was easier to be angry at you than to be sad. Easier to push you away than to admit how much I needed you. Tears were streaming down her face again. I'm so sorry for all of it, for being cruel and ungrateful and terrible. You deserve so much better than the daughter I've been. I set down my tea and walked around the table to kneel beside her, just as I had that morning when everything changed. Listen to me, I said. You are not perfect. You have made mistakes, some of them serious, some of them stupid, some of them absolutely terrifying. But you are my daughter, my stubborn, brilliant, foolish, brave daughter. And there is nothing you could ever do to make me stop loving you. She fell into my arms and we stayed there on the cold kitchen floor, holding each other, crying, finally letting out years of pain and fear and unspoken words. I thought I was protecting you, she said finally. I know. I thought if I pushed you away, they couldn't use you against me. I know that too. It was stupid. Incredibly stupid. I pulled back, wiped her tears with my sleeve, but it was also brave, misguided and idiotic and absolutely reckless, but brave. She laughed, a small, wet sound that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. What happens now? She asked. Now we sleep. Tomorrow we clean up this kitchen. Next week you go back to class. Yes, you're going to finish your degree, no arguments. And we start over, together, honestly. No more secrets, no more walls, no more treating each other like strangers. And the people, the organization, what if there are more of them? Agent Moore said they got the leaders. The rest will scatter, and we'll have protection until the trial is over. And after we'll figure it out, like we always do. Madison was quiet for a moment. Then, Mom, I never really wanted almond milk. What? This morning. I didn't care about the milk or the thermostat or any of it. I was just so scared.
So tired, I woke up every morning terrified that it would be my last, and I didn't know what to do with all that fear, so I shrugged helplessly. I took it out on you, because you were safe, because I knew you'd never leave, no matter how terrible I was. That's a lot of trust to put in someone you've been treating like garbage. I know, but I was right, wasn't I? You didn't leave. You stood in front of those men like you were going to fight them barehanded. I was. I know. That's why I love you. Even when I'm a doormat? She flinched. I shouldn't have said that. You're not a doormat. You're the strongest person I know. You just love too hard, forgive too easily, and never stand up for yourself when you should. I stood up for myself this morning. Yeah, you did. It was kind of terrifying. Good. Remember that the next time you want to boss me around in my house.
I'm writing this from my kitchen table, the same table where a bag of stolen money once sat, where I learned my daughter had been living a double life, where my world fell apart and came back together again. Madison graduated last spring, summa cum laude. She's in law school now, determined to become a prosecutor. She says she wants to put people like the ones who hurt Derek behind bars. I think she's trying to balance scales that might never be even, but have learned not to tell her what she can't do. The gray-haired man, his real name was Victor Crenshaw, is serving 35 years to life. The trial was hard. Madison had to testify, had to relive every terrible moment, but she did it with her shoulders straight and her voice steady. And I sat in the front row every single day, making sure she could see me whenever she looked. Agent Moore checks in sometimes. He's been reassigned, but he sends cards on birthdays and holidays. I think he feels responsible for us somehow, for putting Madison in danger, even though she volunteered. She tells him every time that she'd do it again, and I believe her. As for me, I finally quit 2 of my 3 jobs. Madison insisted on taking out loans for law school, refused to let me pay another cent. You've given enough, she said. It's my turn. So now I work at the library downtown, surrounded by books and quiet and the occasional child looking for adventure. It's peaceful, simple, exactly what I need. Madison came home last weekend for a visit. She made dinner, actually made dinner, not order takeout while I cleaned up. And afterward, we sat on the porch and watched the sunset, something we hadn't done since she was small. Mom, she said, I need to ask you something. Anything. That morning, when everything happened, when you refused to move, when you finally stood up to me. She paused. What changed? After all those months of letting me walk all over you, what finally made you fight back? I thought about it for a long time. The truth is, I'm still not sure. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was something that had been building for years. Or maybe there was something in her eyes that morning, some silent plea beneath all that anger and cruelty. I think, I said slowly, I finally realized that being your doormat wasn't love. It was just another way of failing you. Madison was quiet. You were drowning, I continued. And instead of throwing you a rope, I was letting you pull me under, thinking that if we drowned together, at least you wouldn't be alone. But that's not what you needed. You needed someone to be strong enough to save you. And you were. Just barely. Another day, another week. I shook my head. I'm grateful for that freezer, grateful for whatever instinct made me stand my ground. Madison laughed. Only you could be grateful for the worst morning of your life. It was also the best morning. It was the morning I got my daughter back. She reached over and took my hand. Her grip was strong, certain. Nothing like the trembling girl who'd collapsed on my kitchen floor a year ago. She said she's never going to be that person again.
The one who treated you like that. I know I can't erase what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life making up for it. You don't have to make up for anything. Just be yourself, the real you. That's all I've ever wanted. She smiled, a real smile, the one I remembered before everything went wrong. She said she can do that. And you know what? She has. Every day, in small ways and large, she shows me the person she's become. Calls to check in, sends flowers on random Tuesdays, comes home for dinner even when she's buried in case studies and legal briefs. We still argue sometimes. She's still stubborn, still fierce, still convinced she's right about everything. But now we argue like family, loudly and passionately, but with love underneath it all. I used to be afraid of my daughter, afraid of her anger, her cruelty, her cold eyes that looked at me like I was nothing. Now I'm just proud of her. And every time I open the freezer, I remember. I remember the fear and the shock and the terrible revelation. But I also remember what came after. The truth, the healing, the second chance we both almost threw away.